This lake is full of surprises, all kinds of surprises. You could spend a lifetime exploring its shores, its surfaces, its depths, and its denizens, and never feel fully satisfied that you've truly mastered this lake. And even if you think you figured it out, something will come along and you'll be given an infinite number of choices on how to proceed. You could ignore this unprompted thing entirely. You could put a name on it and believe that by doing so, you've somehow made a meaningful connection. You could brush it aside and say, it's nice, but I've seen it before. Or you could spend hours with it. You could spend days with it. You could walk through the sloppiest mud and push through the thickest thicket just to get a better look. You could forget that everything else, everywhere else is happening, and even feel guilty that you're somehow evading responsibilities. But then you realize, wait a minute, this visitor in front of me is just as real as everything else in this world, and in fact, it might even be more real coming from this lake than anything that I'm told is real coming from a screen. And you understand that instead of evading responsibility, you're actually being more responsible by responding to exactly what is in front of you. Sounds like spiritual work, I know, but it's actually quite grounded and practical when you think about it. All this to say, my latest experience of being presented with something and then deciding what to do with it involved swans. Those graceful, snow-white birds that show up from time to time, congregating together, forming huge flocks that dominate this lake. More specifically, my experience involved tundra swans. Now, I understand that tundra swans might be more commonplace where you live. Eastern populations typically overwinter in the Chesapeake Bay down to the Carolinas. But where I live, in western Pennsylvania, we only see huge flocks of tundra swans typically when they're passing through on their migratory circuit. Late winter is a great time to observe large numbers of tundra swans. And as easy as it is to see their white feathered bodies against the icy water, you may actually hear them before you see them. Tundra swans have such distinctive calls. To me, they almost sound like a pack of yelping dogs. And if they're passing by overhead on their way to their next resting spot, you'll hear them whistling way up in the sky. When you watch the mannerisms of tundra swans, you'll notice that they routinely do just a handful of things. They clean and preen. They feed by dipping their heads into the water in search of aquatic plants. They play. They hang out with other waterfowl. They wave. And they imitate marshmallows. Now, as perfect of an arrangement as this seems, being witness to hundreds of tundra swans at a single time, you know that it cannot last. And indeed, it doesn't last. These tundra swans are only temporary visitors who must continue their journey thousands of miles northward to their breeding grounds in the Arctic tundra. You know, people often wonder about the healing powers of nature, and they'll ask questions like, do you forest bathe? Are plants medicinal? Are mushrooms medicinal? Do they really work? And to me, those are funny questions, almost beginner-level rookie questions, because when you spend time with swans, what is healing and what is not becomes obvious. Now, I'm not saying that swans are medicinal in the sense that people should be popping swan pills or ingesting swan tinctures or anything like that. But a decent question to ponder is, might the act of spending time with swans be healing in and of itself? Well, let's consider this for a moment. Aren't there drugs that quell an overactive mind? And can't swans do that for someone too? Aren't there drugs that calm the nervous system? And can't swans do that too? Aren't there drugs that elevate one's mood? Aren't there drugs that induce feelings of oneness with all that there is? And can't swans do that too? Well, I don't think it's crazy to believe that the answer to some of those questions might be yes. But there's something about all of this that you gotta realize. Swan therapy isn't a quick fix. You can't just see a swan once and expect to receive the benefits from having done so. You can't just put a name on a swan, snap a lovely photograph, and wonder, is this what it takes to feel better? Am I healed yet? If only healing were that easy. But of course, nothing worth having is. I would suggest, therefore, based on my experiences, something like this instead. You have to spend lots of time with swans, quality time with swans. You have to observe them. You have to feel like you're part of their flock. You have to reach the point where you feel like you are one with them. And I don't mean this in some new agey kind of way. I mean it in the sense that by noticing and observing and paying so much attention to the sea of white in front of you, that you are yanked away from everything else in this world that isn't swan, so that your whole world becomes nothing but swan. You're not believing this to be true. It is true. And no randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled study needs to convince you that this is what it means to heal. And when you reach this point, where the whole world becomes nothing but swan, even if it's just for one moment, you win. But don't take my word for it. I'm just a guy who was walking around this lake one day and was presented with swans while simultaneously given an infinite number of choices on how to deal with them. I could have ignored them completely. I could have forgotten that they ever made themselves known to me at all. I could have put a name on them and believed that by doing so I somehow made a meaningful connection. I could have said, look, I've seen you before, but I really don't have time for you today. Or I could have spent hours and days with them. I could have walked through the sloppiest mud and pushed through the thickest thicket just to get a better look. And, well, as you know by now, that's what I decided to do. Not to distract myself from the stresses and troubles that plague a modern world run on godless devices, but to instead be even more informed and to enmesh myself even deeper into the realest, most meaningful things imaginable.